Joss House, Rendezvous, a short story. A mysterious rendezvous follows an altercation in a country hotel. In the apathetic autumn there are silky mists, smelling like bulrushes, coarse and hoary, that seep up the straggling creek beds and fill the cold with an eerie white fluff, invocative of far-off lands. It oozes slowly down the gullies and eventually engulfs all the streets and lanes of ugly reef, low-lying as it is. The town is inactive, the last mine closed in the winter of bitter harvest. All the remaining gold retired into deep caverns. There is a tractor repair store and a bakery and a flower shop that sells daffodils to gullible tourists. Only one of the original 9 hotels, the Brassy Arms, still graces the dashing waylay. It is a rickety affair, stripped of its once fine verandas and painted in an awkward shade of rusty beige with dangly sheets of untidy corrugated iron. Almost every night, except on Bingo Tuesdays, it gathers lonesome farmhands and workers from throughout the district, and an assortment of voluble locals wearing their long-chinned grievance with modern dentistry. The publican Ralph once grew turnips for a living. Now he sits idle, reading form, and lets his wife Shelley pour beers and cook bowls of greasy times-3s. On those Bingo Tuesdays, a busload of ladies from Guildford fills the orange chairs. They are noisy and highly perfumed, so the locals stay away. Other nights, the TV prevails, and the orange decor hums with transient nuance. One such ordinary night, getting late, as the mists turn the street lights insipid and gnarly dogs take fright at the silence, the door opens gently and a Chinaman walks in. It is Jimmy Foo. He's wearing his Jimmy Foo hat. "Evening, Jimmy Foo," says the hard-working Shelley. "What will it be?" It is always what it is. For reasons that elude the average Caucasian man, Jimmy Foo always prefers a glass of cool water, and into it he slips a small paper parcel of bright red dust, presumably some potion of his ancestors. He nods and does not need to say, "Water, thanks, Shelley," and then he gazes around, trying not to seem too plainly Asian in a bar full of pale obviousness. At the bar itself, plastered, is Cody Ringer, 4th son of an unhappy man. Next to him, staring off in idle wonderment, is Tractor Jack, notorious for the bulbous blue snorkel in the middle of his face. He is, in fact, thinking back to a round of darts many years before. In the corner is Mick Grit, the Irish eyesore, and a table full of rustic whiners. Then, not far away, cordial and dainty, a picture, a fancy, is Undaunted Annie, her young streaks pearly and her smile one of the unsung creations of simple nature. She looks up. Her eyes meet in a glance with those of Jimmy Foo. But on this particular night, it is Mick Grit, 3 beers beyond reasonable, who wants those roving eyeballs and their perfect whites. There were some nights, deep in the bosom of fireside parlance, when Undaunted Annie sits enthralled, and when Jimmy Foo, wandering in and adding his red dust to a glass of water, tells her all about the ever-knowing legend of the Great Jade Mountain. The mountain itself, he says, rises up out of the distant mists, also fluffy, reputedly the abode of celestial masters. It is far, far away in another world, a world with more things to do than smelling ale breath and watching reruns of lesser merit among the snuffles of small-town labour. She had once dreamed of jewellery, Undaunted Annie, and palaces and carriages, and lands where it rains in December. Once, that is. Mick Grit is sour. He slices up beer coasters. The rustic whiners jibe him and remind him of those brief times that Undaunted Annie sat in his car and agreed to be his beau. It was an honest mistake. She was lonely. The Irish eyesore is no Casanova. His face is a rugby accident. His hands are numb thumbs of clumsy flesh. He glares over at the new arrival. He spots the knowing glance. It is a bleary night. The monotony of past times goes musty. "I remember," he calls out suddenly, Mick Grit, loud enough that everyone might hear. "I remember when ching-chongs were not allowed in public bars." This provides a long pause, and no one thinks it worthy or wise to respond. Shelley looks at Jimmy Foo. He sips his glass of herbal and kept it strictly to himself. "I remember my old dad saying, 'Mick, don't you trust those yellow bastards,'" Mick goes on. "They'll dig up all the gold and send it back to China. And one day," he says, "there'll be no more gold to dig, and the mines will close, and we'll all be poor and stretched for a splendid living." The whining rustics all agree that Mick's dad was a sagacious man. "Bloody ching-chongs," the eyesore adds, spinning at the table. "Bloody ching-chongs," chime the whiners. When Jimmy Foo looks around, the table full of rustics point out the gesture. Undaunted Annie looks nervous. There are tension unforthcoming. She glares at the Mick, who wears his thin, belligerent occasion. "What are you looking at, Ching-Chong?" he calls out to Jimmy Foo. The nasty furrow on his face grows red. The publican looks up from his form guide. He likes a sassy bay in the fifth. He gauges the situation. He raises his brow at Shelley. "That'll be enough, Mick," she warneth in a relay. "Well, these bloody ching-chongs come over here and steal all our gold," Mick does explain, noting just how correct, with foresight, his old dad has been. Have not the mines all closed when the shiny reefs recede? Have not hordes of little Chinamen dug 10,000 shafts into the unsuspecting earth? And where was it now, all that bounty and glitter? This was all that is said for a while. The television resumes its gravity, an expose on the Miss World scandal, Hoopla, one of Undaunted Annie's least favourite shows. Les Cuthbert, the drainage expert, drops in, much later than usual, and purchases a pint of old-fashioned black and tan. Tractor Jack makes comments on questions no one remembers asking. Shelley takes a double breather, looking up at the buxom wantons on the screen, and says she believes they're all just a testament to silicon and money, in her plain Jane opinion. The eyesore, however, broods yet longer. His old dad's words are stinging his cauliflower ears. Underemployment dampens an Irishman's sense of proportion. Some pattern on the Laminex fuses his hateful attention. It is getting on past 10 p.m. when he sees, from the corner of his glare, Jimmy Foo move around along the bar and saunter carefully surreptitious past the table where Undaunted Annie sits pretty and neglected. In a move designed so that no one might notice, the Chinaman pulls his hand from his pocket, straightens his Jimmy Foo hat, and briefly locates this hand palm down on the surface in front of her. Just as sleek, she hardly looks up, and as he removes this hand, hers fell upon the self-same spot, and it is over in a second. What Mick Grit does not see is the small jade disc inscribed with ideograms and gibber that Undaunted Annie further slips from the table and into her innocent bag. On his way back to the bar, the Chinaman has to move past the table full of whining rustics. "Hey," Mick Grit decides to sound. The Chinaman ignores him. "Hey, Ching Chong, I'm talking to you." Jimmy Foo keeps his lips pursed. He determines to say nothing at all. The Irishman stands up instead. "What the hell you think you're doing, yellow man?" he demands to understand. Jimmy Foo's face stays blank and unresponsive. His eyes are large and dark. His face is round and china-like, and speaketh nothing of his inner dispositions. He straightens his Jimmy Foo hat one more time and moves to resume his private location. He has a glass of water to complete. I saw you, swears Mick, his eyes narrowing, his lower half stumbling on a misplaced chair. You saw it, didn't you, boys? He asks the rustic whiners. They saw it, they says. He launches an accusation. He points at Jimmy Foo. I saw you slip something to Undaunted Annie. Jimmy Foo gives a shrug. Bloody ching-chongs, says the eyesore again. Tractor Jack turns around. Les Cuthbert puts down his drink. Shelley stops wiping the ice tray lid. That'll be enough, Mick, she declares yet firmly once again. Ralph is the publican, but it is her bar in the actual end. There is a standoff. Mick mutters some crudity about the famous yellow peril. There is something about the stench of yellow blood. It is an historical offence. His tongue be twitching with the race riots of 1853. Annie stands up, undaunted. Leave him alone, Mick, she fumes. She is a little thing. Her eyes know the dangers ahead. Ugly Reef is the town of her ill fortune. She has gone to the big city once, and slept in a nice motel. She has looming intimations of wide vistas and the great wonders of the world. It's when the Chinaman turns away, moving his back to the grievance, that Mick Grit finally bites his onion. Hey, he calls again. Don't turn away when I'm talking to you, yellow man. Yellow is the colour of surrender. Irish is the temperament of sudden moves. Then Mick makes a reckless barrage in the multi-air. There is a sudden shifting of chair legs on the floor. His intent, frothy with ales, is to place his big buff hand on the offending shoulder and demand the yellow man's unregulated attention. Casually, though, the yellow man sidesteps the manoeuvre as if he has eyes in the back of his hat, and without further effort he takes the eyesore's chunky elbow and twists it to the ground. It is a glance of silk-braided control. It happens in a swift relocation. In a single shift, turning the big guy's Irish weight against him, he leaves the eyesore on the floor, wailing that the bloody ching-chong's broken my arm. This, obviously, is an invitation for the rustic whiners to pick up items of orange furniture wherewith to confront such Chinese aggression. Ralph is alarmed. Now, he is saying. Shelley is still saying, that'll be enough. Undaunted Annie is crying out, leave him alone. Cody Ringer, fourth son of an unhappy man, on the other hand, seems slightly entertained. Nothing much happens in the brassy arms. The Chinaman stands firm. A blessed calm fills his looks. He adjusts his Jimmy Foo hat just half an inch in an auspicious signal, and all his senses organise the room. Tractor Jack gets the message. Bloody hell, he mumbles, drunk, and he climbs down off his bar stool, looking for timely cover. Go easy, Les Cuthbert implores, worried for his black and tan. My arm, the bloody ching-chong has broke my arm. The eyesore is crying still. So the rustic whiners seek revenge. They come forward in riding boots. The idea is to smash Jimmy Foo's head with bold Australian vigour. Wham! Jimmy Foo slides over to the ideal axis, and effortlessly again he raises his arm, takes hold of the flailing chair leg, and spins it in a somersault around a still point only he can see. A second the front comes his way. He steps back and leftwards, deflecting. Then he spins around, bamboozling the third oncomer with a twist, who flies at him but seems to trip on an unmoving nothingness that sends him crashing facewards into the corky wall. The fourth offender pulls a knife from his side. He uses it for skinning rabbits. But as he comes forward, the Chinaman's foot meets it in the midst of its fiery trajectory, and it falls like a limp jigger onto the old Laminex display. Picking it up, Jimmy Foo launches it towards the men's room door, and it incises the dartboard, a bullseye, spectacular, with an impact that makes a swish and a crack. The next offender swings a punch instead. Very quickly he is dumped on the floor right next to the eyesore, with his elbow broken as well. The dust settles. Cody Ringer has not moved. The Chinaman goes back to his water, finishes with some casual sips unperturbed, then puts a shiny shilling on the bar. It is just a glass of water, but he always puts a shilling on the bar for the privilege. In the late gloom, about 2 a.m, an urgent knock beats on a dirty white door. There are voices. Eventually, a light came on inside, and sleepily, undaunted Annie's father, Bob of the Johnsons, arrives to investigate the din. "What is it?" he asks, grumpy, throwing open the broken fly-wire array. At the door are Neville Draper and Kid Willow, and Frank Hannaford, and another figure, maybe Gary Thompson from the Berry Farm. In the long shadows of the porch light, their cars puffing fumes in the driveway. Draper is doing the talking. He blurts it onwards. "Sorry to wake you, Bob," he begins. "Where's Undaunted Annie? Mick Grit and his boys are out gunning for Jimmy Foo. Jimmy Foo did some Chinese sorcery on them tonight down at the Brassy Arms, and they're looking for Undaunted Annie too." It was succinct. Kid Willow steps forward, fresh-faced, and offers his assessment. "Looks bad," he say. Bob of the Johnsons is a man of slender verbiage. His dressing gown is ragged. The house, merely a shack, is a double-fronted weatherboard made from wasted timber in the wake of the previous war, and it creaks holus-bolus when he shifts his weight onto his other begotten leg. He sniffs, looks out into the fog of late hours. It takes him a country minute to summarise the occasion. Then he turns his head and yells, without so much as ceremony, "Annie!" This wakes up the Kelpie across the road. "Annie!" "So where's Mick now?" Bob of the Johnsons did then inquire. The dimensions of the ruckus has arrived. Neville Draper says, "Dunno. It is all still in the fluid hallways of the night. There are rifles involved. A cold emptiness hath settled. A gibbous moon, never comforting, has risen with sallow momentum in the east, a brimming harbinger of unease." Kid Willow comes forward further into the porch light again to describe a few more details. There is a drama on his breath. Bob of the Johnsons listens, unshaven, and then mumbles the obvious estimation that Mick Grit, as everyone knows, is an idiot anyway. He turns again. "Annie! Annie!" "A bit of a scene at the hotel tonight, Bob," Neville Draper does reiterate. Bob asks what happened exactly. They explain how the Chinaman has used some magic potion. He takes on a whole table full of rustic whiners and leaves them in a heap, they do explain. "And what does it have to do with Undaunted Annie?" "Well, you know," says Neville, awkward for saying so. "She was sticking up for Jimmy Foo." Bob of the Johnsons leaves the door jam. "Annie! Get here!" he hollows into the straining house. Frank Hannaford underlines that Mick Grit is as upset as he is unsightly and has been sent into a Celtic swelter, and that all his rustics are equally as vexed. They are driving trucks and have done angry burnouts near the water tank. Bob listens. He says that Undaunted Annie has come home from the Brassy Arms and gone directly to her room. "Annie, get out here!" In a few minutes, beyond this, everyone looks at everybody else. Bob, waking up, rushes inside. He comes back out. "She's gone," he announces. It is inevitable. The entire delegation frowns. Gobs of unsettled anticipation. There is a track winding back to the old-fashioned shack. Curly gum leaves mar the scratchy pathways. It circles the duck pond and the municipal picnic lawns and cuts behind the Ugly Reef fireman's tin habitat, dilapidated and rusty for want of generous donations. There are tall yews overarching and another path suitable for bicycles down the back of the bottle depot, uncomfortably askew on the side road. Few people know the shortcut. It is guarded with a thick mulch of blackberry prickles, nestling the rank ecology of snakes and rabbits and warty brown toads. Undaunted Annie has walked that way for years. It leads out of town, squiggles among the abandoned diggings, over the quartz rise that scars the landscape like cellulose, then follows the creek bed and puddles of mud to where the Chinese camp had been back in dusty days. Then it was a crowded plain. Now it is desolate except for those gravestones, and high on the hill, the Joss house, built of handcrafted red bricks, surrounded by rough pickets, and still tended against the great ravages of weather. The ugly posse has gone to Jimmy Foo's. As it happens, Mick Grit's elbow is not entirely broken, but his temper is fractured in several spaces, and it is time to teach the Chinaman a lesson. He puts it in quite obvious words. We can't have no yellow man using his ching-chong ways. It was a progression of devious invasion. First they steal our gold, then they steal our girls. The rustic whiners have all seen it happen. It was sorcery for sure. Have you noticed, somebody says, how he tips that Jimmy Foo hat with magical intentions, and then strange forces disarm a bar fight? It was unnatural. They kicked in his doorstep. He's gone. Gil Trunkett, the discount cladding man, lives next door. Have you seen the Chinaman? They ask him in the moonlight. He looks at the rifles. You don't want to be causing any trouble, Mick, he pleads. Has he seen Jimmy Foo? Who knows the ways of Chinamen in the spiky hours of the morning? The posse ramble back into their trucks and go blaring down unmade road in a wild fit of rancour. Neville Draper's team and Bob of the Johnsons head the other way. The mist swells. The eerie white fluff rolls up out of the creek in thickening folds. The whole town is under a blanket. There are only 4 or 5 street lights anyway, and they are fuzzy in the fog. The moon, lying on its back, casts a glib forewarning and is as cold as methylated spirits. The night owls have their goggles on. The vapours of the dampened earth seep up from the mine shafts full of ancient rain and rotting timber. The forest has a dread compact with the sky. Nothing is dry. The air is dead with inertia. Everything knows there are stagnant hours until the dawn. The undaunted Annie's tread crunches on pebbles. She makes haste. In her pocket, in her fingers, is the small jade disc with ideograms and jigger that Jimmy Foo slipped to her in the brassy arms. She makes her way along the track, brushing against the blackberry canes in the sterility of the gloom. The Joss house lies ahead. Certain inclinations render unsteady the yearning heart. A small town borrows its spare moments from bleak eternity. The reef itself, reputedly unattractive, was opened up by small-statured men from Cornwall when somebody stumbled on a loose nugget. Most of the Chinese came on junks from Shanghai's careless bustle. Annie comes into a clearing. In the dusty days it was huts and opium dens and market stalls. She looks around. It is a few minutes before a slim figure steps out of a dark mark in the tree line. It is Jimmy Foo, and he is wearing his Jimmy Foo hat. I'm glad you came, Annie, he says softly, and he takes her hand. Undaunted Annie smiles. It is a smile nervous and tender. Jimmy Foo is shapeless for a moment. He wants to be sure. She trusts him with her eyes. There is a soft telepathy between them, driven by the ectoplasm of the mist. They hold it. It lingers. Then she feels an urgent chill. We should go, she supposes. It is a proper supposition. The search parties are converging. Mick Grit and the rustic whiners have been to the lookout and all the apparent places. They shoot up the road signs on the turn-off to Guildford. Then somebody suggests checking the empty haunts of old Chinatown. Neville Draper and Bob of the Johnsons, Kid Willow, Frank Hannaford, and maybe it was Gary Thompson from the Berry Farm, did 3 laps of the centre grid and all approaching roads. It is Kid Willow sitting in the back seat who leans forward and says, "What about the Joss house?" Holding that hand, Jimmy Foo turns adrift Undaunted Annie so that she can face into the seeping moonlight. The Joss house is a simple building on top of the rise. It is only 3 rooms. One of them holds an altar to the deities of southern fortune. Annie opens her inner eyes. Coming up out of the fog, looming here and there among the gravestones, are 100 Chinamen, all apparitions of long toil. Slowly they make their way towards the temple. "Come on," says Jimmy Foo. He straightens up his Jimmy Foo hat and leads the way. He asks if she still has the disc of jade because the ancestors will want to see it at the door. It is in her pocket, in her other hand. She holds it tight. It is her own piece of the great jade mountain. It is a mountain that touches the constellations that wheel around the pole. Soon she will be there, far, far away, in another world. Trucks and cars are traversing up the road. The eyesore cometh. The apophatic autumn lays its claim to an unforgiving night. As she and Jimmy Foo join the throng settling around the gateway, each of them handing their jade portion to the Chinese ancient standing silent at the threshold, the silky mist fills the outlines of all Undaunted Annie's celestial questions, and she does not care if she ever sees Ugly Reef and the snuffles of small-town labour ever again. Just minutes later, Mick Grit and the whiners get there first. There is nothing to see but the great fog of time. The gravestones are round like pillars of granite at the end of sandy beds, and everyone is sleeping the sleep of ages. Up on the hill, the Joss house is still surrounded by the rough picket fence and leans with an awkward incontinence from the weakening mortar, but is otherwise deserted. It is rough and inauspicious. The 3 rooms are like the 3 domains of heaven and earth and man. Outside, on one corner, is the burner where in the golden days the Chinamen would burn their scribbly prayers. The silence is crunchy. The soupy moon smooths the building in muted shadow. The scrubland intrudes into the opening, but all is convincing. Someone says they saw someone there. Mick looks around. Then reflecting lights strain in the mist, and Bob of the Johnsons and the search party arrives, swinging in the car park and aiming headlights into the tangle of trees. The cars pull up. The search party disembarks. "Where's Annie?" Bob wants to know. "That's what I want to know," says Mick. There is a confrontation of cold gaze in the grim hour. "Put your gun away, Mick. Don't be an idiot," is the reply. Nick Draper says that he too saw some figures in the dull moonlight mulling near the building, and so did Kid Willow, but everyone stands around and there is no one and nothing to be seen. The moonlight makes taut partitions. The eyesore puts his weapon on his shoulder. He sniffs the night defiant. He walks up to the Joss house, kicks open the gate, and uses a torch to look around inside. Bob has a feeling. He walks over to a rise in the ground and stares into the nothingness. "Annie!" he calls. "Annie!" His voice carries all the way to China. It comes back in an empty echo. Mick Grit reaches the altar. Everything is cold. Rain has dripped in through the roof long ago. Possums have nibbled on the offerings. The incense cups are depleted. There is only the heathen images of the guardian deities grinning at him in the dark. He goes to leave but sniffs the air again, turns and notices there on the wooden ledge of the altar proper a small jade disc, and he thinks back to the slick delivery that night in the brassy arms. He slips the disc in his pocket and cocks his gun. He scowls with an ugly pug face. He makes a pact with the foggy seepage. He'll spend a lifetime looking for Jimmy Foo.